On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very healthy treat. He's a leading functional medicine expert, and he started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers in the world, while also being named one of the top 50 function and integrative doctors in the nation. No big deal. He specializes in clinically investigating underlying factors of chronic disease and customizing a functional medicine approach for thyroid issues, autoimmune conditions, hormonal imbalances, and brain problems, just to name a few. He's the host of the popular and dynamic The Art of Being Well podcast and best-selling author of a plethora of books, including the New York Times bestseller, Intuitive Fasting, instant classic. His ability to break free from the limiting approach of standard care, which most often calls upon drugs and hormones as a first defense against these diseases without a real inspection, is second to none. He uses breakthrough diagnostic testing and analysis that's rarely done in conventional settings to uncover the hidden causes of why people feel the way they feel. He's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific father and husband. Please welcome the brilliant, charismatic, and abundant, the handsome and trailblazing Dr. Will Cole. How you doing, Dr. Will?
Oh my gosh, I need to use my hype man every morning. It's like amazing. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We were having an awesome conversation before we hit record, and I was trying to get my puppy to calm down, which is still a challenge. But we probably could have chatted for about an hour, and eventually, we should probably save the juicy stuff for the show. For our audience, in case you're not familiar, my best suggestion is to do a deep dive, play catch up, check out all the awesome stuff Dr. Will has going on. What I think is most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Let's get weird.
Doc, what is your superpower?
Superpower. I'd say in my line of work, researching. I'm an Enneagram 5. If you know anything about the Enneagram, it's like kind of how you see the world and perceive it. I'm an Enneagram 5, and that's my strong suit is being a voracious learner, reader, and it serves me well with my job.
I love that. Okay, good. I never heard that one before, if I'm being honest. And for those people that might not be familiar with that, what you mentioned, is that something they should check out?
Yeah. So Enneagram, I'm not an Enneagram expert by any means, but I know enough to get by. And there's 9 different types, and it's actually based, if I can communicate this properly, it's based off of childhood messages we get, or childhood wounding is what they call, which we all have. We live in the real world. That's just life. And we all, based off of nature and nurture, kind of come out with this, how we perceive the world. So there's 9 different types, and then you have wings, and it's helpful. A lot of businesses, a lot of corporations, a lot of startups, any place where you deal with people and communication, a lot of companies I'm hearing from patients, they do Enneagram typing for groups. So you can communicate and understand people better, because, as you know, if you're in a relationship, whether it's professional or personal, you can have the same event and it could be interpreted completely different.
100%. And think about like perspective, right? Like 2 people can do the exact same thing, same vacation, same experience, but depending upon how they look at the situation and perspective, they have a totally different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. I want to ask you one more fun one, and then we'll dive into some of the serious stuff. And the only is for such a treat today. When you wake up every single day, for you personally, and I love to ask the great sis, what are some non-negotiables for you?
Some non-negotiables for me, I guess, number one, something that comes to mind is just gratitude. It's just the morning, just waking up and having some stillness in the morning. I take the dogs out. I told you I have 2 golden doodles. It's the simple things, but I have such an immense gratitude for my life, and it's not the big stuff. It's like getting up and being able to like move my body and go and getting a cup of coffee and go getting the dogs out and like being in nature. I live in the middle of the woods. Those are the type of things that aren't, I'm not saying they're non-negotiable. I appreciate them so deeply, of just being able to be in nature and do the simple things in life.
Yeah, I love this. Do you work out too?
Yes, I do. Yep. So a combination of weights and cycling, climb rides, walking a lot. I'm in the room where I'm consulting patients at the telehealth center. So I'm in here talking online for 10 hours a day. I have a standing desk with like a treadmill situation. So I'm going over labs as I'm walking. I get an insane amount of steps 10 hours a day standing here. It's insane. I could walk to you in New York right now. I have no problem. It would take me a while, but I'm trained well.
That's awesome. So without even leaving your place, you might have like 10, 50,000 steps.
Oh, easy. Yeah, easy. I mean, yesterday, no joke, and this isn't every day, but I had a day where it was mainly meetings and, just was in a role. I walked about 8 hours yesterday, just at work. I had to stop for a podcast because I haven't mastered the whole, like, I thought about it today. I thought about walking while we recorded, but my mic cord, it just wouldn't be the best sound for you. So I decided against it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I love it. What's your favorite type of workout personally?
Weight training. I love weight training. I love like a good burnout. I just love it. And you don't always get it, but then you do this. I just certain ones are just better than others. I'll do I have the Peloton app, and people think Peloton just is a cycle, which it is, but they also have amazing trainers, of which I've got to know many of them over the years in the wellness space, and they just are super smart, and they have great weight training classes. So I prefer that.
Yeah, I love that. Do you ever run or not really?
Run, no. I have a treadmill at home where I do that. I walk in nature, but I'm not really running in nature. I'm hiking more.
Yeah.
Hiking. Yeah.
Understood. Love this. I always love to just get an idea, and everybody
Yeah.
so forth. I used to love weight training. Now I'm more of a runner just based upon where I'm at this season. But there's something to be said about also going up, lifting weights, clanging and banging, getting it
Yeah.
out. Priceless.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. I don't hit you with some of the juicy stuff. It's cool because there's so many places we could take this conversation, but I want to make the most of the time, and I want to hit some things that I think will be really valuable that people can extract and start bettering their lives right away. And one of the cool things that you talk about right now, and it's kind of trendy to talk about like gut health, but you make it so digestible, no pun intended. I wanted to ask you, why is gut health impacting our brain health, Doc?
So it's something that I've written about online, like articles for the past 13 years. When we started talking about it, nobody really cared about gut health. And still, even now, I mean, we're still scratching the surface, but you're definitely right. It's more, I think people are more aware of it than ever. But your gut and brain are formed from the same fetal tissue. So when babies are growing in their mother's womb, the gut and brain are formed from that same tissue, and they are inextricably linked for the rest of our life through what's known in the scientific literature as the gut-brain axis, or the connection between the gut and the brain. So there's far-reaching implications to this. About 95% of serotonin, our happy neurotransmitter, is made in the gut, stored in the gut. About 50% of dopamine is made in the gut, stored in the gut.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Pleasure and happiness. I'm reducing it, I'm oversimplifying it, but we need this for a healthy mood, a healthy, balanced, regulated mood. They don't pass through the blood-brain barrier as we understand it, as far as the mechanisms of action but what they do is they work on GI motility, meaning they get your gut moving, and they work upon the vagus nerve, which is sort of the main communication line between the gut and the brain. It's the largest cranial nerve in the body. And it is what's needed for the resting, digesting, meaning the calming, anti-anxiety, and gut health, digesting aspect of our autonomic nervous system, or the parasympathetic. So that's how these neurotransmitters are made in the gut work upon our mood through the vagus nerve. So a lot of my work with our telehealth patients is improving vagal tone, and part of that is supporting gut health. So it's through the vagus nerve, it's through neurotransmitter, and it's through the microbiome itself. The microbiome is the term for the trillions of bacteria in our gut. So depending on the study that you cite, it's upwards of 100 trillion bacteria living inside of us. And to put that into perspective, we have about 30 trillion human cells. So we are exponentially more bacteria than human, a sort of like a sophisticated host for this microbiome, or this, small life, if you break that word down, microbiome. And it is needed. The metabolites these bacteria make, they actually influence our mood. They crosstalk with the brain and impact our cravings, impact our mental health, impact so many things in our body, and our hormones, which impact our mood. So there's just so many like far-reaching pathways of how the gut, which is known in the research as the second brain, how it impacts our mood and how our productivity throughout the day. So we can just be our best and feel our best. And if you think about it, even just on a basic level, the intestines even kind of even resemble the brain. If you think about that, I think there's so many reasons why researchers call the gut the second brain.
I'm smiling for many reasons. Number one, I know that you are very passionate about your work, but this specifically has you jazzed. And I love that you were talking about this stuff before it became a little bit more mainstream or trend, whatever the case may be. And I love the way you just described it. And I'm wondering, for someone that's listening right now that isn't so into the sciencey stuff, but they hear you and like, wow, he's convincing, I want to better my life. What is something tangible that they can do immediately to start improving their gut health?
Well, it starts with food, right? I mean, you need to look. If you've not looked at it, I would really want you to know every food you eat either feeds health or health problems. It's one or the other. Some in big ways, some in negligible ways.
Nothing
But
in between that is very black and white.
it exists on a spectrum. It's a continuum, but it's doing one or the other. You're either getting a net positive or net negative, right? You're doing something. And there's so much bio-individuality with this. In some ways, you're not going to notice it directly, right? I'm not saying it's overtly obvious, but it's influencing your biochemistry in some ways. So I would want people to look at the foods that love them back. And this isn't about like demeaning certain things or oversimplifying things when it comes to food, but really just shift your paradigm away from all this sort of dieting mentality to let's focus on foods that love me back. And that's really a lot of my job, is really finding out that bio-individual way that food impacts your mood, impacts your gut health, your second brain. So I would say start with food. And if I had to look at the most common things, if we're just being like, what's most people going to get the most bang for their buck, look at the inflammatory core four, is what I call it. It's the foods that are ingredients that are most likely to mess up your mood and mess up your gut health and raise inflammation levels in your body. I didn't mention this, but your gut is 75% of where your immune system resides. Inflammation is a product of your immune system. So there's a whole field of research called the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells. So it's researchers in the scientific journals looking at how does inflammation impact how our brain works, impact our mood. But inflammation doesn't just impact our mood. It impacts hormones, impacts our metabolism, impacts our sex drive, impacts our muscles and joints, impacts everything. It's the commonality between just about every health problem under the sun: heart disease, cancer, autoimmune conditions, and brain health issues. So the foods impact all of this. So the first food would be gluten-containing grains. There are better versions of gluten, but wheat, rye, barley, spelt, mainly wheat. You can do sourdough bread that ferments and breaks down some of these grain proteins and make it more digestible, that some people tolerate. But for the most part, looking at wheat as being an inflammatory food. Number two would be, and let me just go back to wheat real fast.
Please.
Is it the wheat? Is it the wheat, or is it what we've done to it? It's a bit of everything, right? It's the hybridization of the wheat. It's the spraying of glyphosate on the wheat. So it's not as simple as saying, well, wheat equals bad. Humans had consumed wheat for thousands of years, but it was mainly a famine food. It's stored well. Now we're feasting on a famine food, and then we hybridize it and spray it with glyphosate. So there's like multifactorial, like there's multi-pronged reasons why this thing isn't jiving with our biochemistry. But that's a big topic. Number two would be industrial seed oils like vegetable oil, corn oil, soybean oil. Again, it's overconsumption of these things by itself in small amounts may be fine for some people, but it's the ratios of omegas 3, 6, and 9, which are polyunsaturated fatty acids. The modern Western diet, which is around the world right now, we call it Western, but it's really every industrialized nation. We are consuming too many omega-6 fatty acids and not enough omega-3s. You hear about omega-3s like fish oil. That's one of the reasons why people see benefits from that, is because they're kind of correcting that imbalance of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, because the modern Western diet is so pro high omega-6 in these industrial seed oils, which are in a lot of packaged foods and in restaurants. That's what's being used as cooking oils in restaurants, pro-inflammatory. Now, third would be added sugar, which most people know that. But even the nicer sounding euphemisms for sugar, anything with the suffix OSE, even things like agave nectar, like the marketing terms for a lot of these things make it sound like healthier, like agave nectar, like someone's just picking a piece of agave and squeezing it into your cup. It's highly processed, high in fructose, and can be hard as far as driving metabolic issues, which the majority of people in the West have some insulin resistance and blood sugar issue because they're not eating enough fiber and consuming too many sugars. And then fourth would be dairy, which there are better versions of dairy out there. I'm not demonizing dairy as a whole, but the conventional milks out there that aren't grass-fed, that are homogenized and pasteurized, they're kind of depleted of a lot of nutrients. So you want to look at, grass-fed, organic, full fat, even sheep's and goat milk can be better for people. But a lot of it has to do with, you'll see a lot of health food stores have A2 milk out there. Beta A2 is the type of casein or dairy protein that our ancestors would have consumed for a long time. But yet, because of the crossbreeding of cows and then what we've done to the cows and what we're feeding the cows, we're eating completely different dairy than our ancestors would have consumed. So the commonality between all those four things is what researchers call an epigenetic genetic mismatch, or an evolutionary mismatch, that we're consuming foods that we've, as a human species, never consumed before in human history. And now that's what's causing, at least in part, it's not just about food, but what's in part driving and triggering these chronic health problems. So that's in short what, you asked the question, like, what can people do? I would just educate yourself on those four things. And the fifth thing, if I had a +1 to the inflammatory core four, it would be alcohol, but that's a big topic.
So let's say that for a second, because that is a big topic. It's become trendy now to be like, quit alcohol altogether. And I'm just curious, obviously it's not great for you. I think everybody knows that. You can argue moderation, stuff like that. What is your position on it?
My position on it is the overwhelming amount of research that's out there. The healthiest amount of alcohol to consume is 0. So there's no healthy amount, right? It's a neurotoxin. The healthiest amount is 0, but I'm a pragmatist. As someone that implements these things in people's real life, most people aren't going to be puritanical teetotalers and never consume alcohol. So we have to find ways to support their body if they're going to drink. And if they are going to drink, what's the least offensive source of neurotoxin they're going to consume? So for most people, it's going to be organic, non-GMO, organic, biodynamic, regenerative wine. So it has some polyphenols and antioxidants. That's not why I'm having people drink it, because there's better ways to get those antioxidants. Right. But there's at least some redemptive quality, and it's low sugar too. It's organic, whatever. And it's low alcohol, meaning that they purposefully limit the alcohol content, and certain wineries do this to limit the amount of neurotoxin that's out there. And also it's mainly going to be European wine that fits this criteria, because the domestic wines, they don't have to label things. They can put a lot of colors and preservatives in the wine that you'll never know is in there. And a lot of times people are responding to these mega purples and additives that are in the wine that's causing a problem. So it's not just about the alcohol that have a problem, it's a lot of the additives. So there's different companies out there, like Dry Farm Wines is one that curates these wines that fit this criteria. Again, at the end of the day, I'm still going to tell you it's not a health food, but as a pragmatist, that's what I would say for telehealth patients that choose to do that. And then there's things you can take, like glutathione and activated charcoal and binders and digestive enzymes that can break these things down to make it a little bit less like you don't pay for it so much the next day.
Understood. So, Doc, first of all, I love this. It's so valuable. Thank you. Is it safe to say you don't consume at all?
I don't consume at all. So it's been a handful of over the course of my life, so I can't say never, but I don't. I'll say since the pandemic, I haven't at all, because before the pandemic, it was like, all right, maybe occasionally like a work event, it would happen. It would be like I'd sip on half of a glass of wine, and just because other people did it at the table. But now I just think it's been so long since I've become sort of a recluse, and I'm in telehealth, so I never leave this room. So I haven't really needed to do that socially.
Yeah.
And I think if I went to a party now, I wouldn't even do it. I'd just get a freaking like a seltzer water. There's so many mocktails out there.
Yeah.
I would do something else.
Yeah, fair enough. I love this. So good. And also I hear you. And I heard people say that in a couple of years from now, people might look at alcohol the way we now kind of look at cigarettes, where it's just so
Yeah.
obviously not good for us.
Yeah, I think so. You see the growing amount of the sober curious movement. It's
Yes.
not even just a thing. There's so many people that are on that. And I even see people, I know this is a dumb example, but I see things that hit the airwaves and the headlines. The amount of people in these reality shows, which a lot of reality shows are bent around alcohol. Like they get these people drinking too much, it makes for good TV.
Bro.
And these people that are on these shows are now giving up alcohol because it's ruining their life. And you don't have to be on a reality show to see alcohol ruins a lot of people's lives, and you don't have to be a quote unquote alcoholic for it to ruin your life.
Bro, 100%. Love that. I agree. And I see all the time. A word that you mentioned before when you were talking about gut health was inflammation. It's popular as well, and obviously very important. And I wanted to ask you personally, for myself and also for the listeners, about 5 million, I know this will hit home. How do we stop inflammation in our body?
Yeah. Well, it starts with food. So all those foods that I mentioned are going to dramatically, if you eliminated or at least reduced or at least found better for you versions, like I gave caveats for all of those better for you versions, if you did that, you would dramatically lower inflammation levels in the body, which is the commonality between every chronic health problem that's plaguing us as a society. And then the plus one, if you looked at that. All right. Number two, and this is a big part of our work clinically. It's something that I talk about in my latest book called Gut Feelings. It's the reason why I call that book Gut Feelings is because I'm dealing with both physiological and the psychological, the gut and the feelings, the physical and the mental, emotional, spiritual. So we talked about the physiological stuff, right? And there are different herbs and botanicals and biohacking protocols we can dig even deeper to lower inflammation. But on the mind-body component, it's huge. So it's not just about what we're feeding our body. What are we serving our head? What are we serving our heart on a daily basis that's raising inflammation? I talk about a study in the book about it was a study about self-compassion, which sounds like such a woo-woo concept, but it has some very concrete science behind it. And it was talking about shame and embarrassment and stress. And they had people do stressful activities like public speaking and doing math. And they measured these interleukins, an interleukin 6 marker, which is an inflammation marker. And they found that people that were doing these activities had high inflammation levels. But the people that practiced the most self-compassion had the lowest inflammation levels. So that seems like an abstract concept, self-compassion, but I teach how to do it for our telehealth patients, and we teach how to do it in the book too, so people can really start retraining their brain, retraining their nervous system to serve their physiology as far as their mind. What are they feeding their body as far as their thoughts and emotions and experiences to calm inflammation? That's a lot more abstract and non-prescriptive and non-linear, but it's important. So I would say take a look at your thought life. Take a look at the things that you're consuming on a daily basis as far as social media. And is it adding to your, sympathetic fight or flight stress state? And many people they're not realizing they're consuming this information, just like they're consuming foods that don't love them back. They're consuming other sources of information for their body that doesn't love them back. So this is really a conversation around healthy boundaries, but in a real authentic way, in my opinion. Like the ultimate relationship you want to look at when it comes to healthy boundaries is with yourself. Like, what are you allowing in your life? And yeah, so it's not about restriction, it's about self-respect. And I think that this is a big topic. People have to make individual decisions about it. It's not about judging people and saying, well, this way is better than that. It's like, what's going to work for you? What's sustainably going to work for you in your life? And doesn't mean people are perfect, but I would really cultivating gratitude practices and self-compassion practices. And that's why breath work, meditation, somatic practices are so important. I see them impact people's physiology so much, just as much as of a food that they eat. So that's something other than food that people can start to explore.
You do so many things that I love. I'm such a fan, and it's one of the reasons I was looking for this conversation. But one of the coolest things that you do, kind of subtly, is you create this hybrid of not only getting healthier by the stuff that we've been talking about so far, but you also kind of marry that with personal development. And I think it's so special. Like, you talk about boundaries, and you not only talk about like foods that don't love you back that you should probably not be consuming, but you also talk about like protecting your peace. And I also heard you say, I think a little bit recently, and I would encourage everybody, if you're not already, to check out or Dr. Will's content and play catch up. It's awesome. And one of the things I saw you so recently was stay in your light. And not everyone deserves your time and energy. How significant and important is that for everybody?
Yeah, that's huge. It's absolutely huge. Because look, when you're looking at lab data, and that's what I do, and that's why I said researching helps me, right? Because I can read the research and apply it in people's lives, but I also can figure out what are these missing pieces to your health puzzle and why you're doing all the things, that's many of my patients do. They are erudite, well-read, high-performing, like type A people, and they're better off than they would be if they weren't doing those things, but they're kind of spinning their wheels in certain areas, right? And they're looking to see what's missing. So I have to be beyond the basics and really research in the areas that aren't looked at oftentimes. So when you're looking at lab data and you can clean up somebody's food, you can give them herbs and botanicals and like natural medicines, you can lean into biohacking things, all that stuff's important. But when you see me posting on social media about like these mind body people could call it self-help, but I would say more of like the spiritual, non-prescriptive stuff. It's so important to my work because it's the non-linear things that oftentimes get missed, because it's the non-linear, abstract, mental, emotional things that it will impact your physiology and you don't think it does, because it will impact inflammation just as much as a food that doesn't love them back. And it's really important. And it also influences the food choices many times, right? If somebody's like stressed and frenetic and maybe in a toxic relationship, unhealthy boundaries with their friend group, has a stressful job, they will eat food. They will be more apt to eat foods that don't love them back. So that's why these like external, relational things are really important, because they actually will be a better foundation and a opportunity for presence in their life to make more mindful decisions when it comes to breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks and all the things when it comes to nutrition. So it's just inextricably linked, I guess, to nutrition, which is another part of my work.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, is this similar or the same or not? I'm curious, because you often talk about also using food as a mindfulness tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a huge piece. So it's a concept that we talk to patients about. We talk about it in the books. It's food peace, and it's using food as a medicine, but also food as a meditation. And that's a sort of a mindful eating approach that I think I don't want to make broad sweeping overgeneralized statements when it comes to food. I really want the person to be their own N of one experiment and look at lab data, look at how they feel intuitively, and seeing what works for their body and what doesn't. Because there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of context, there's a lot of spectrum stuff. Whereas like maybe it's negligible, maybe it's not working for them, but it brings them a lot of joy when it comes to food or an activity. And we can weigh the pros and cons on that. And that's why I said it's not black and white in that way. It does exist on a spectrum. And we have to like look at that. So by using food as a meditation, using your meals as a meditation and as a medicine is a great way for you to take inventory of what's serving you and what's not. So something that we teach at the clinic here is that, okay, I don't want to tell somebody you can't have that, or that's, you fell off the wagon, right? When it comes to their protocol, there's no such thing as a wagon. Like, your life's the wagon. What I really want them to discover for themselves is what food loves them back and which foods don't love them back. And yeah, so they can ultimately eat whatever they want, but if they use food as a medicine and meditation, they can start being more mindful of how that food made them feel. Eat that food mindfully. Was it worth it? Maybe caused some bloating, Maybe it caused some fatigue, blood sugar issues. You didn't feel so good. You felt kind of like crap afterwards. But you were hanging out with friends and your family. It was the socialization of it all. So it was worth it for you. Yes, you didn't feel so good. Maybe we'll implement some binder, glutathione, some digestive enzymes in your protocol. So you still can go do that. And you've mindfully made that decision for yourself. You have that agency, but you have body awareness to know that this food didn't work for you. So you probably will have less of it, but you still can go and have that socialization aspect, which is very healing too, and not being isolated and having healthy community and healthy relationships in your life. Or you may use food as a medicine and a meditation and determine, oh, you know what? This really wasn't worth it for me. I don't like feeling like this afterwards. And I love feeling great more than I thought I wanted. I wanted that food. And can I have that socialization without having that? Is there another option on the menu? Can I swap things out? We teach people how to, speak up for yourself at a restaurant and say, hey, I'm trying to avoid this, this, and this. Do you have any alternatives? Can you swap this out? And how to live your life and not live in a bubble, but eat in a way and live in a way that loves you back. So that's what I mean by that. And it's just having agency over your life instead of being at the whim of whatever the months and the activities that you have on your schedule.
Yeah, this is so good. And even to take it a step deeper, first of all, I love that you're talking about this. This is so important for everyone out there to know that there's a choice, right? And not only the community of what you're seeing, but even like the medical system and doctors. And one of the really cool things that you say that really moves me is to be an empowered patient and to know that you have a choice, right? And a lot of times, like doctors or society, whatever the case may be, they're kind of programmed to prescribe this or this. Oh, this is what you're done with, and do this. But there's a choice. There's another option, right?
Absolutely. This is huge. I like, if I had to define functional medicine briefly for people,
Please.
we interpret labs using a thinner reference range. So anybody that's listening or watching this right now, you'll know when you get your labs, there's your number on the lab, and then there's this reference range. We get that reference range largely from a statistical bell curve average of people who go to labs. Think about that for a moment. Who are the people that typically go to labs? They're people, sadly, that are going through some stuff. That's why they're going and getting labs done. So it's skewed towards pathology. It's skewed towards not the most robust health. So there's a lot of people that intuitively know, I don't feel so good. I'm having this fatigue, this digestive problem, this inflammatory problem, this anxiety, this depression, whatever. They go to their doctor, the doctor runs the basic labs, and the doctor says, you're fine. You're just depressed. You take this antidepressant, or you're just getting older, or you're just stressed. You're just a new mom. All these may be well-intentioned reasons as to how you could be having symptoms despite these mostly quote unquote normal labs. What they're unintentionally telling you is you're a lot like the other people with health problems that you're being compared to. Comparing yourself to people with health problems is no way for you to find out why you feel the way that you do and how you can feel your best. So in functional medicine, we're looking at optimal, not average. We're looking at a tighter interval, an X to Y range within that larger reference range. If you're taking people with health problems out of that reference range, what's left? It's optimal, vibrant wellness. Like, where does longevity reside? Where does long, healthy lives reside? Which is the functional range, where your body is functioning the best. That's where we get our name, functional medicine. So we're interpreting labs and realizing that health and health problems exist on a spectrum. By the time somebody is diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, heart disease, cancer, mental health issue, diabetes, it's about 4 to 10 years prior on average, according to research, 4 to 10 years prior that things were brewing on this inflammation spectrum, meaning chronic health problems for most people don't happen overnight. So you can, no matter where you're at on that continuum, what can you do today to start moving your health in the positive direction? We actually wield a lot of influence over that in most cases. Number two is we realize we're all different. It's bio-individuality. So we cannot have a lot of cookie cutter approaches to getting well. And there's a lot of underlying root variables to consider when you're looking at both the physiological and the psychological variables that are at play here. And then we run more comprehensive labs as well. We're looking at root issues, but based on data. We're looking at underlying gut problems or chronic environmental toxins like glyphosate or other herbicides and pesticides. heavy metals. We're looking at biotoxins like mold toxins, chronic Lyme disease. We see a lot of nutrient deficiencies, whatever the case may be. We want to look at the most relevant data points to get to the root cause of why you feel the way that you do. So that's in short what functional medicine is. So to answer your question more pointedly, most people don't know they even have those options in standard model of care. The standard model of care is trained to diagnose a disease and match it with a medication. It's sort of a pharmaceutical medicinal matching game in a way, which has its place. I'm not anti-medication at all. None of us in functional medicine really are. We just ask the question, what is your most effective option that causes you the least amount of side effects? And for some people, medications may fit some of that criteria. Like it's the most effective option. They need to be on it. It's the least amount of side effect. No big deal. Some people, many people are alive because of medications. So it should not be an either or, us versus them sort of tribalism within healthcare. It should be both and. It should be the best of both worlds. And I want people to have choice when it comes to their health. I want people to be empowered when it comes to their health. And the majority of health problems that people are going to their doctors for are largely lifestyle driven. They're largely impacted by foods and stress and sleep and physical activity and environmental toxins, unresolved trauma. These are things that we largely have some governance over. We can start to deal with these issues to allow our body to be in homeostasis. So that's why I want people to know they have choice. And it really, I think that we're making some good ground. I mean, as I mentioned, the Cleveland Clinic has a functional medicine center. There are many mainstream institutions that have functional medicine centers now. Things have changed in the past 13 years, since I've been in telehealth, but we have a long way to go. And many people don't know. They just, it's like, well, it's my only option. Like this pill and see you later. But ultimately, nobody is sick from a medication deficiency. So even though it may be a tool within your toolbox, why do I have the problem in the first place? Maybe I need to be on that medication, or maybe I need to be on that medication for a time while I get my health in order. But what's the long-term goal here? Like, how can I really use the best of both worlds?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for doing your part in contributing and allowing people to understand that there's a choice. And also, like, let's be honest, it's also a business, right? So they want to maybe subscribe, some prescribe, so use the insurance companies and not think too hard. And you're showing people, is there a more effective way that provides the least amount of side effects? Because with anything in life, like anything that's good typically comes with a price. So if a medicine temporarily makes you feel better, at what cost, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a cost, a financial cost, but there's also like a life quality loss
That's
too,
what I
right?
meant. That's what I meant. Yeah.
And people pay it in both. People pay it in co-pays and insurances, and chronic disease is actually very expensive, right? We know that
And side
economically.
effects.
It's
Yeah.
not only individually expensive, but it's also, if you look at what insurance companies are billing, I mean, it's very expensive from a socioeconomic standpoint too, and it's bankrupting governments, it's bankrupting economies, the burden of chronic healthcare. So this is both a macro and a micro issue that's just money. That's just money. But then you look at the lost quality of life that I see. People don't having the energy to do the things they want to do. People don't, I mean, they work their whole dang lives and they can't even enjoy it because they're burdened by things like anxiety and fatigue and brain fog and autoimmune conditions. And it's just not good for many people out there. And that exists on the spectrum. Are we living our best life? Maybe it's not extreme for you, but maybe you just know intuitively, you know what, I have so much to give, but I don't even have the energy to do it. I see so many people kept back from these things, and you don't have to. These things are largely overcomable, healable, reversible, preventable things. So if that's the case, why would we want to settle for anything less?
I love it. And I love that you're so big on perspective. Like we were chatting before we hit record, and I was giving you a little bit of insight into my story. And for me to pivot, I utilized the cost of inaction. And I actually made it so real that I associated death with choosing to go back and be miserable on Wall Street. And one thing that you talk about, which I think is pretty special and powerful, is that healing yourself is actually healing your children, grandchildren, and generations you'll never see.
Yeah, man. That's the research. When I said that, it's the research around transgenerational or intergenerational trauma. And the researchers that are in that space, they're looking at big geopolitical atrocities like the Holocaust in Germany and Poland, or the Holodomor, the Ukrainian genocide in the early 20th century with Joseph Stalin against the Ukrainian people, or the Rwandan people, the Hutu and the Tutsis in the 90s, and how these epigenetic changes were seen in the people that went through these atrocities were seen not only in the people that went through these famines and genocides, but also their children and their children's children. So this is how, when trauma is literally stored in our body and passed down through generations. And we think of, even on, maybe our ancestors went through something atrocious like that, or maybe they went through something else. We see a lot of family traumas and family cycles that are out there. And I see people reclaiming their health all the time and breaking the cycles of these issues of disorder and dysfunction and dysregulation and disease in their body, and heal not just directly their families. Like their kids are making different choices. It's lighter in the home. It's brighter in the home. But then you think of what's happening on a generational scale. Like they are literally healing generations they'll never get to see. And that's a powerful thing. And we live, whether you choose to have kids or not, maybe it's not your kids, maybe it's just your friend circle. I see friend groups shift because of choices that people make. So it's powerful what we wield. We have the ability to heal not only ourselves, but literally heal generations to come.
Yeah, this is awesome. I want to ask you one more thing before we land the plane, but I wanted to ask you just straight off the cuff. Did you see that? I don't know if you're a movie guy, but did you happen to see Oppenheimer?
I'm going to see it tomorrow with my two of my brother-in-laws.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm a big movie guy. I love Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
I didn't know the extent of the story, and you probably know more about it than I do. But like, this was kind of the beginning of quantum physics and all
Yeah.
the stuff. It's right up your alley.
You know me well, just in the little time we've got to talk. I love World War II history, and I love history as a whole. But I want to read the book that movie is based about. I've heard of great things about the book, but I'm excited to
What's
see
the
it
book?
tomorrow.
Is that the Manhattan Projects?
I don't know the name of the book, but it's about Oppenheimer, and apparently a lot of the script of that movie is based around the book. But don't quote me on the book name. You know who I listen to is, do you know Crystal and Sagar?
No.
That I think Turning Point, not Turning Point, Tipping. I forget the name of it. It's not Turning Point. They used to be on the Hill and they left. There's basically YouTube commentators, political commentators, but he gave his review and I listen. Whatever Sagar tells me to read, I listen to Sagar. So I have to get the name of the book though.
Yeah. We'll exchange numbers after. I'm curious to hear your feedback after you see the movie.
Yeah.
I wanted to just ask you this. I hear oftentimes people talk about autoimmune, and I know it's one of the things that you work on a lot. For the people out there that are like, I hear that too. What exactly does that mean, an autoimmune condition? How would you describe that?
So autoimmune, self-immune is really what it breaks down to. So it's when the immune system's turned against itself. So the physiological mechanism that's happening is something called molecular mimicry. When the immune system has lost, it's the case of mistaken identity. So there's researchers, let's just say this, the conventional data number, it's around 100 different diseases that are recognized as autoimmune in nature. And then there's about 40 different conditions above that 100 that have what they call an autoimmune component to it. But that number is growing like every year. Every year, there's more and more diseases that were not classified as autoimmune or having an autoimmune component that now are discovered to be autoimmune in nature. So it's when the immune system's lost recognition of self as attacking parts of the body. So the most common ones are things like rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's disease or autoimmune thyroiditis, lupus, Sjogren's disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, celiac disease.
I have Crohn's.
Okay.
Not
So
so
that,
bad. My mom and my brother have a little worse. My mom still deals with it. Mine's kind of, I forget the word. I haven't had any flare-ups in years, thank
so
God.
it's a remission. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, great. And that exists on a spectrum. It could be severe for some people and then mild that comes in flare-ups. MS is another one. Parkinson's been shown to have an autoimmune component. So there's overtly obvious autoimmune conditions and then ones that are shown to have it, like even heart disease and some cancers have been shown to have autoimmune components to it. They're not considered autoimmune diseases, let me be clear, yet, but they have autoimmune components to it. I mean, the immune system has been shown to attack certain parts of the body. So that's really what autoimmunity is. Now, the commonality is inflammation. we've been talking about that a lot in today's conversation. But not all inflammatory problems are autoimmune, but all autoimmune conditions are inflammatory in nature. So that's the difference there. You can have an inflammatory issues like type 2 diabetes, perfect example. Not really classified as an autoimmune disease. It's not at all. It may have autoimmune components, maybe, but it's not classified as an autoimmune disease. So that's inflammatory, but it's not autoimmune. Type 1 diabetes is autoimmune. It's when the immune system attacks the pancreas and then the pancreas doesn't work anymore. So they need to inject insulin. So there's two different examples there. One's inflammatory, but not autoimmune. One's inflammatory and autoimmune.
I love this. This is a great conversation. You're so passionate about your work and you're essentially extending life. And it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and you can see that quantified as far as longevity markers and telomere lengths is the end cap to your chromosome. So we look at that and other markers that have been shown to be associated with longer life. You're absolutely right. So it's not just quality of life, but it's quantity of life. So I don't know the exact number because it depends on what you're talking about, but it's significantly, let's just say this, the United States and most Western nations, they have the shortest lifespan of all industrialized nations, meaning that these are not things we need to choose. We don't have to choose between modernity and longevity. We can have the best of both worlds, and people are picking one over the other, and they don't need to. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. If you don't mind me asking, I'm just curious. How old are you, Doc?
I'm 39, man.
39 years young and just getting warmed up. You look great. You did something really right. I mean, 39 is young, but you look great.
Thanks, buddy. I'm going to be the big 40 soon this year, but yeah.
How
thank
soon?
you. October.
Nice. I just turned 38 years young. Never felt better.
Yeah, that's the same with me. I feel amazing. But yeah, I Googled the name of that show. Crystal and Sagar Breaking Points. People need to check them out. They're such brilliant minds of just all things like current events. Great guys.
I love it. Best part for me about this is just the beginning of the friendship. Our community is really, really loyal and engaging. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask, what's the best way for everybody to support you? And what are you personally most excited about right now?
Thank you, my friend. Everything's at drwillcole.com. That's drwillcole.com. But the links to the podcast, The Art of Being Well, is there. Links to the books, the telehealth center patient options are there. But everything's living at drwillcole.com. And what I'm most excited about, honestly, as the book's out in the world, Gut Feelings, it is out in the world now. And what I'm most excited about is, as you know, writing books, it just can be all consuming. And which I love the process. It's a really creative, hardworking process. But I am thankful that it's over and that season's like shifted because I can focus back at the clinic again, which I love. So I love like the geeky, nerdy stuff of like systems and protocols and like how can we produce the best possible experience for our telehealth patients and make it the best it can be. That never stops. Like every year you're just kind of wanting to implement bigger, better things for people. So I know it's like lame, but I'm excited about clinical business processes for patients.
Yeah, and also we're in launch mode right now. It's our first book. It comes out in 2 weeks, and I know what you mean. It's very all encompassing and consuming. As it turns out, writing the book is actually the easy part, and then it's everything after that, and spreading the message and speaking and all that. So there's a lot goes into it. But between me and you, after it comes out, I will definitely exhale and look forward to getting
yeah. Go away to the mountains somewhere and just like decompress and process it all.
Yeah, for sure. This is so much fun. Hang up in 1 sec. I want to connect to you after.
Yeah, sure.
I want you to know you're the definition of wisdom, authenticity, and unbelievable energy. I can personally guarantee that your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy, brilliant nuggets today.
Thanks, man.
Oh, that was great. So much fun, man.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. I'd love to stay connected and support.
Yeah, let me give you my cell phone. You can throw me a text.